Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months. Yo to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans. Only 111 days until kickoff. Make a wish. Till then, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Chargers roster, which I think at this point in time in the offseason, right, it's more or less resembling what it's going to look like in kickoff. Outside of maybe a couple ads via free agency. John Johnson, anybody? I don't know if anyone's got his number. Somebody find his number and text it to Tom. I want to see if we can get some dialogue started with the agent there. Either way, it's starting to look pretty good. By the way, a bit of breaking news from yesterday. The Chargers did sign defensive lineman Nick Williams to the roster. Former Chicago Bear, former New York Giant. In his time with the Bears in 2018, he was actually coached with Brandon Staley. So some connections there. So outside the maybe couple of ads at free agents, this is kind of what we're expecting to see the roster look like. And this is caused me to ask some additional questions, right? What would this team look like if, let's say, we're more or less healthy this season? What are some of the rookie impacts going to be this year? But more often than not, what I'm thinking about is who's going to have that season, right? That magical year where they can finally say they've broken out. And broken out to me doesn't always mean they're going to be a top, 5, 10 player at their position. They're going to be a superstar in the NFL. No, breakout means that they're doing a good job, right? They've got a good season and they found a good spot on the roster where they can make a real impact. So today we're going to go over my top 10 breakout Chargers for the 2023 season. And spoiler alert, you guys are going to see a trend with this one because you're not going to see a lot of starters, but you are going to see a lot of guys I think have a lot of potential to break into a new role with the 2023 Chargers. So before we do jump into that, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you guys want to get in on the best fantasy platform on the web, use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $100. Great way to support the channel and have some fun along the way. With that, let's get into this. Before we do, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action. My top 10 breakout Chargers for the 2023 season. As it stands, like we were saying, the roster more or less looks pretty dang good. Offensive line, probably the best I've seen in my time as a Chargers fan. Wide receivers looking as stacked as heck. I mean, you got two of the best in the league in Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Then Quentin Johnson has unlimited potential. Running back room, as of right now, looks pretty good. And then, of course, at quarterback, we are looking very, very nice. Gerald Everett there to tack on. Not a bad tight end either. And then on defense, outside of a couple of different things, I would say we look pretty dang good, right? Safety might have some question marks around it. DB as a whole looks pretty dang good depending on how J.C. Jackson pans out. And then defensive line, edge, outside of maybe middle linebacker, everything seems very, very, very nice. And I think middle linebacker is going to turn out to be very good, especially with Eric Kendricks added to the roster. So who do I think is going to make a big impact this season in terms of breaking out? That's going to impact maybe some of the less firm parts of the roster. I think a lot of these guys have a chance to do so, and then even elevate some of the parts of the roster that I already like. So let's start with our honorable mentions before we jump into the top 10, guys, because I do think there's a couple guys very much so worth noting that could make a big impact, but a lot of it depends on the outside factors, right? Resolving circumstances. The first one being J.C. Jackson. I think a big thing that Chargers fans need to see from JC is some positivity in terms of his recovery. And we've seen that the past couple of weeks. He's come out and said that his recovery is looking good. There's a good chance that he's going to be ready for maybe camp or the start of the season. Either way, JC, one of the biggest free agent acquisitions for the Chargers in very many seasons, needs to be able to come back and make an impact immediately. And the reason that he's a honorable mention and not a breakout candidate for me is because we know his potential with the New England Patriots. We know that he has the potential to be a number one corner in the league, a lockdown kind of guy, but we need to see that translate to the Chargers and in more of a comeback player sort of role. So we're hoping to see JC make his return and make a big impact with the team, contending for the number one corner position. I think that at this point, Asante Samuel Jr. kind of has a firm grip on it, and I do believe JC Jackson has the potential to try and contend for it, but at this point, we got to wait and see how that injury is recovering and how he bounces back with the system that he started to show signs of fitting in better towards the end of his injury. So next up, the last honorable mention on this list is going to be this man right here. And again, a lot kind of involves revolving circumstances. JT Woods. Now, as you guys remember, JT Woods, 3rd round selection in last season's draft. This guy, there's something about him that Brandon Staley adores. And I think, for one, the measurables, the things that you really can't teach in height and speed, he checks those boxes. So obviously he does have potential to be coached up into a very, usable player in the NFL. What we saw last season wasn't very encouraging towards the thought of him maybe starting this season, but who knows? Maybe he does take a drastic turn for the better over the course of this offseason and contends for the starting free safety position on the Chargers roster, because as you guys know, with Nasir Adderley making his exit from the league, retiring, hope he enjoys retirement, the Chargers do have a vacancy at safety. As of right now, I do have Alohi Gilman kind of filling that spot, but we also want to see what the potential is of a JT Woods, who again was drafted that high for a reason. He's got the height, he's got the speed. What we saw last season did involve a lot of lack of, I would say, awareness and coverage, maybe bad positioning. We would hope to see a little bit more development on JT Woods this season and hopefully win the hearts of Chargers fans and the coaches to maybe see a ball hawk out there in the secondary, because that's one thing he is very good at. Interceptions, going up there, contending for catches, very, very good at that, but he's got to position himself better in the pros. We'll have to wait and see. So there are your honorable mentions. With that, let's get into our top 10 potential breakout Chargers for the 2023 season. Starting at number 10, we'll work our way up to the top. I do have a man we just mentioned in Alohi Gilman. Now, I did just mention him in this depth chart right here. And again, this is kind of the reason why he's not a little bit higher is because, for one, there could be a competition with JT Woods. And for two, I still think there is one potential signing that could happen in John Johnson or maybe even any other safety, Adrian Amos, et cetera, et cetera. The Chargers rely so heavily on their safeties that I would anticipate if they're going to sign another free agent, it might be at that position. So it does make Alohi's situation a little bit unstable. But either way, the reason he's on this list to be, or at all, even with those revolving circumstances, is that if he's a starting free safety, or let's say strong safety too, the guy you're swapping in and out with Derwin James, I think that he's going to show us that he's more than capable of earning an extension with the Chargers going forward. I think this might be his contract year, right? And I think there's a good opportunity for Alohi to really show us what he's got, because there's some people that say, oh man, Alohi doesn't really have what we're hoping for in terms of a starter, maybe a bit of a liability in coverage, et cetera, et cetera. I saw some pretty good things from him last season. I saw a big, level up in terms of coverage. He's certainly shown that he's maybe more attuned to playing in run support, which he definitely did very, very well for the Chargers last season. I think this year definitely has potential for him to step up into maybe even a bigger role, whether it be starting safety, which is a lot to ask of Alohi. I wouldn't call him the best coverage safety out there in the league, but if he's the best guy suited for the job on the roster, I think we could do a lot worse, if that makes sense. So I'm hoping to see Alohi Gilman out there showing the stuff, earning that spot, hopefully earning that extension with the Chargers going forward, because if anything, I've liked seeing him in that Derwin relief role, because as we know, Derwin moves around the defense a lot, and having a guy like Alohi back there to kind of share duties with Derwin has been pretty nice. He's definitely kind of molded himself into that role very, very well. So Alohi Gilman at number 10, I'm feeling pretty good about it. I think he's kind of, edged himself a spot on the roster. As you can see here, I think that's versus Nick Chubb. Good in run support as well. I would say the Chargers fans are hoping to see another level up this season where he can kind of start turning some heads and say, hey man, that Alohi guy, hopefully we see him next season as well. Next up at number 9 of potential breakouts. This one, I honestly, guys, you can rank him 9, you can rank him 2, you could rank him 5. I think he has a lot of potential to be a lot higher, just depending on how the Chargers want to use him this season. Either way, and at his floor, I think Darius Davis is going to have a nice breakout into the pros, given what his skill set is. If you take a look at the NFL draft this last season and you're looking for a guy that's got a high ceiling in terms of special teams as a returner, you're going to find very few guys better than Darius Davis. Davis may end up actually being the best in that entire class when you kind of look at their ceilings, because Darius Davis with 6 special teams touchdowns, some of the best speed you'll see in the NFL, even in the pros. A lot of people were asking me, director, what's this talk about him clocking the fastest time? He only clocked in a 4.32 or 4.34, I forget. I think it was 4.32. Definitely we've seen guys faster. Well, in one of his collegiate games, he clocked in somewhere around 24 miles an hour, which is one of the fastest recorded times in NFL and collegiate football history. And that's why we're kind of, pushing that narrative out a little bit, because that speed, sometimes when you see it in their pro days, especially pro days, or even in the combine, they don't really reflect what you see in game day. And what we see in game day with Darius Davis is some insane speed that the Chargers have not had on this roster in a long, long time. Now, as I mentioned, a lot kind of depends on how they use Darius Davis this season. I think, again, his floor as a special teamer, I think, has a lot of potential to bust out as one of the best returners the Chargers have had in a long time. When was the last time the Chargers drafted a guy with as high of a ceiling as a special team returner? It's been a while, right? We started to see an uptick in production thanks to guys like Carter last season, and then even the guy beforehand, excuse me for forgetting. The Chargers are kind of putting that into the forelight of, hey, we need to improve the special teams. And so on the very, base level, Darius Davis is going to add some value there. And I honestly think he's going to do a very good job. The one thing I need to see him improve are the drops a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you guys. He did have a few drops in college that, of course, can definitely hurt your football team in terms of winning any given game. But he also does have the ceiling of scoring, which is something the Chargers haven't really been good at in a very, very long time. Now, where I think the real ceiling exists is how much he's involved in the offense, right? If the Chargers want to get this guy involved more, let's say in like a 5-wide kind of look, right? You got Justin Herbert out there looking for Darius Davis, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson, maybe even a Jalen Guyton. Like, all these guys on the field at the same time would be kind of nuts, right? If they can find a way to get, a majority of these speedsters out there. That could really put a positive effect on what Justin Herbert can do and what he'll look like this season, because all of a sudden that deep part of the field is wide open for business, ladies and gentlemen, and that's going to, instill fear in our opponents going forward from that point, because that part of the field is no longer safe. We no longer have, an offensive coordinator that can't access that part of the field, either Kellen Moore. A lot's about to change. A lot's about to change with this offense, and Darius Davis could be a pretty big part of that. He, at this point, I think, edges out as the fastest wide receiver on the roster, and that certainly could be put to use in stretching the field, trying to go for those go touchdowns, which, again, if you guys were to ask me before Justin Herbert's rookie season who Jalen Guyton and Tyron Johnson were, I would, spit in the wind. Like, I don't know. Who knows who those guys are? I've never heard of them. Are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? Well, all of a sudden, when you pair them up with Justin Herbert, they created something magical. And that's kind of what I'm seeing with Darius Davis and Quentin Johnston this season. That could be pretty huge. The potential for multiple H-bombs this season in a very, very, I would say, upwards of, over 10, 12, who knows, I think are very, very high. I think the potential for 20-plus yard touchdowns just went up a lot, and Darius Davis has a lot to do with that. So let's move on. Darius Davis, the speedster, welcome to the Chargers at number 9 on my list. Next up, we've got a fan favorite from last year, a guy that I anticipate is going to be involved a lot more this season. You guys know the name, Xander Horvath, fullback for the Chargers. I believe there's a hybrid role in the stars for this man going forward. You guys remember Gabe Neighbors? The Chargers were trying to get him involved. The Chargers, former fullback on the roster, they were trying to get him involved more a little bit in the past, maybe handing him off the ball a couple of times here and there. But it just didn't feel like Neighbors had the momentum to carry any sort of ceiling in terms of yards after the catch. On the other hand, you got Xander Horvath, who I think is completely the opposite. One of the freakier athletes that we've picked up in the past couple of years via the draft. This guy's already shown in the first few weeks of the last season that he could be a weapon in terms of scoring touchdowns. You guys remember that? I think in the first 2 weeks he had 2 or 3 touchdowns. I think a couple of them receiving. That's ridiculous. And then the Chargers kind of, they forgot about him. Poor Xander was kind of left on the bench. We didn't really throw him out there in those packages anymore. I kept asking myself all season, why? Why not utilize pretty much a tight end, right, at the fullback position? Why not utilize a player that has that kind of skill set that maybe not a lot of, teams are looking out for in terms of as a weapon for Justin Herbert? This guy, again, it's really difficult to match up and cover, even a base, like 2 or 3 tight end packages, get everybody covered by linebackers, especially if you throw the fullback out there that's really good in receiving. That can really throw things off for a defense, and that's why I feel like Xander Horvath is going to be utilized a lot more just as a base utility kind of fullback, right? But then you kind of look at the sort of offense that maybe Kellen Moore wants to instill with the Chargers. Somebody asked me last week, what I meant in terms of Xander Horvath and Austin Eckler being Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott. I didn't mean in terms of they're going to be the exact same look, the exact same kind of combo. But what Xander Horvath can be is the Ezekiel Elliott to the Tony Pollard that is Austin Eckler on this team. And what that basically means is he's your short yardage guy, right? And I think the Chargers, outside of maybe going out there and signing a guy like, let's say, Kareem Hunt, even Ezekiel Elliott, I think they do have guys on the roster that can fulfill those responsibilities. And I think Xander Horvath, when you're asking a player to do something like that, is probably the best one on the roster suited to do so. And he's got a very high ceiling, in my opinion. So I would say Xander Horvath, very, very good chance of breaking out this season. I think Kellen Moore is going to give him more opportunities to shine and work towards his strengths. And I think we're going to see a little bit more consistency in terms of attacking those short yards with a guy as big as he is on the roster, with the kind of power he possesses. I'm very, very excited to see what he's got. And even at a very bare minimum, I expect to see him involved as a fullback a little bit more this season. We actually didn't see as much as I was hoping to see last year. So seeing, let's say, an Isaiah Spiller running behind a Xander Horvath, I think has a lot more potential this season. So his impact as a blocker, as a receiver, as a runner, I think I'll go way, way up with the new OC on the Chargers this season. Next up, at number 7, this one actually kind of shocked me. When I sat down and I wrote down all the names of guys that I thought were going to make a big leap this season, or at least cement themselves a role with the team, this guy, I don't know what's going to be this high on the list for me. At number 7, we're going to go ahead and highlight a Jordan McFadden, right? Recently drafted Chargers offensive lineman. Now, when drafted, okay, a lot of us were looking this guy up, like, where does he play? What's his role going to be with the team? He's maybe a little bit shorter, but has very long arms. Is he going to be a tackle? Is he going to be a guard? A lot of these questions got answered in time, right? It seemed that, again, very, very good tackle, left tackle for Clemson in his collegiate career. Very, very solid, if I might add, man. His stats, it looks very, very nice coming into the pros. The one big thing that's going to be holding him back is his size, which is probably a big reason why he fell, or maybe was drafted where he was. I think a lot of people were expecting him in and around this range. It takes a special kind of team to see a potential in a player like this. And I think the Chargers have kind of turned into that organization when it comes to offensive linemen. Like, hey, dude, we understand that maybe God didn't give you a 6'5" frame, 350-pound beast kind of build. But we see that you did pretty dang well in college, so we're going to go ahead and say maybe you do pretty dang well in the pros as well. And I think that the potential for that in a Jordan McFadden does kind of exist. Now, I'm trying to push out of my mind that he's the next Jamari Sawyer, right? Jamari Sawyer, who was so good with the Chargers last season, who was going to make this list, but I think he already broke out, right? Maybe Jordan McFadden becomes that next big, value signing at offensive line. I don't know if I would take it that far, but I will say that McFadden has enough experience, or I should say potential, playing almost anywhere on the line outside of, let's say, center. Injuries do happen that I feel like when he is asked to step in, whether it be in rotation, whether it be in relief, whether it be because of injury, I think he's going to do a pretty solid job. And I think what the Chargers are going to find is that they've got a really, really nice depth piece in Jordan McFadden with possibly a pretty high ceiling. I wouldn't know if to start at some season. The Chargers offensive line already looks very, very nice, but who knows, right? Maybe the Chargers find themselves a guy past a Trey Pipkins, right? Maybe this is the next Trey Pipkins a couple of years down the line when that contract expires. But at the very, very least, I think we got ourselves a very nice swing tackle, and I think that he's going to be given the opportunity to get a few starts here and there, at least a couple of snaps, per game, to really show us that, hey, man, there's a nice ceiling, and maybe even a nice floor with Jordan McFadden that we can expect even coming into his rookie season. So I'm going to say a light breakout for Jordan McFadden, but I think if anything, he's going to prove to us that we have a nice depth option on this line, which has been proven in years past is a very, very important factor to any offense. Next up at number 6. This one actually gets me kind of giddy because I love when the Chargers find value in the draft. And it's not very often that we see a huge smash, success like Jamari Sawyer, but we do see some value, right? Where it's like, hey, man, this guy drafted in the 6th, 7th round. He's doing stuff. He's out here, making the difference for the team, whereas a lot of other teams can't say the same about their 7th or 6th round selections. So let's talk a little bit about Jasir Taylor, cornerback. Right, drafted last season. You guys seen a little bit of a trend with some of the names on this list. I think it's very much so warranted because now we have a bit of a preview of what we can expect from Jasir Taylor. Now, if you were to ask me last season, right, just fresh off the draft, hey, director, who has the highest, the higher ceilings? Like Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard. These guys drafted pretty close together in terms of DB, right? I probably would have told you Dean Leonard because Dean Leonard definitely a lot faster and a bit bigger, right? It doesn't say that Jasir Taylor is slow. He is not slow. And also, Dean Leonard also has, I would say, maybe a bit more upside in special teams, which he did prove this last season. However, Jasir Taylor really has kind of found himself in a good spot going into 2023. Now, the Chargers, I don't remember if it was because of injury or they were trying to rotate guys. And I think there was a Bryce Callahan thing going on at that point. Jasir Taylor got some snaps in the slot last season. And honestly, he did awesome, right? There were some plays and some moments where it's like, some rookie mistakes, some rookie moments, right? Someone had a senior moment, but backwards. I think that, those are things that he's going to learn from and the coaches can work with. But what I saw in terms of flashes and potential and, honestly, future potential to maybe hold down a backup slot role, even a starting slot role at some point, I think that exists with Jasir Taylor. And I think the Chargers, with what they did this season, maybe not signing much talent in terms of corner, maybe not drafting much talent in terms of corner, they have a guy in mind that can kind of hold down the fort there. And I think that Jasir Taylor has some snaps in his future this season to continue proving that campaign. Now, hopefully he continues to build on that and cements himself a little bit more of a permanent, let's say, rotational kind of role, especially with the slot, which the Chargers, they're very serious about their slot players, guys. It's a big part of their defense. Maybe we see another jump from Jasir Taylor this season. And with what I saw last year, some of the abilities that he has in terms of coverage, in terms of ball hawking even, right? I think he ended up with the interception last season. I feel very good about what he could turn into in the future, and I think it starts this year. After seeing the flash in the pan last year, was he a 6th-rounder last year? Proving that he probably deserves a little bit more in terms of, opportunity. I'd like to see that translate this year. So Jasir Taylor, my number 6 guy. I think, again, very excited to see the Chargers maybe finding more value in the draft than we anticipated last year, which the last year's draft, guys, you take a look at some of those late round picks, starting to turn out pretty nice. It was not a bad draft at all. So Jasir Taylor at number 6. At number 5, we got another rookie coming in, ladies and gentlemen. You know what? And this guy, again, a lot of us, as we got digging into the name, kind of understanding what his role would be with the team, a lot of us getting very, very excited about the potential of what he could bring to the defense. At number 5, we got Dan Henley coming in at linebacker. And this dude, again, we talked a little bit about him in my last video, but I think the potential in terms of rookies, right, that aren't expected to start, but maybe take that role at some point in the season, maybe mid part of the season. I think Dan Henley is kind of going to be the guy at the top of the list for me. And it's not because, again, I'm hoping for a guy like, Kenneth Murray to fail. I certainly hope he doesn't. He's a 1st-round pick. To see him turn a corner and prove that he maybe deserves some form of extension this year would be pretty huge for the Chargers. I don't anticipate that being the case. It doesn't mean that I want K9 to fail, but I do very much so see the potential in Henley taking that role because of the fit. I feel like, again, what the Chargers tried to do with Kenneth Murray really put Murray in a tough spot. They asked a guy who really wasn't great at covering in college to go out there and be a coverage linebacker in the pros, and it never really solidified with him. Whereas you're kind of going into an opposite situation with Henley. This guy was one of the best, some people would say even the best coverage linebacker in the pros, and he's going into a situation where he's going to be asked a lot to do just that. And that's why I feel like when paired up with an Eric Kendricks, the Chargers, when asking more often than not your guys to cover, he's probably going to end up getting more snaps than Kenneth Murray at some point down the road. And that's why I feel like, again, in terms of breakout, he's going to have more opportunity than a lot of guys that we've seen on the list already. He's going to get snaps. And again, given his skill set, so long as he can execute, I feel like he's going to turn out to be a very, very solid pick for the Chargers in round 3. So Dan Henley, man, he's got the speed. He's got the coverage ability, which is awesome. I would love to see more in terms of playmaking and interceptions from the inside linebacker position. Of course, we saw a little bit of that last season with Drew Tranquil. I think he's got the potential to start, and I think he's got the potential to overtake that job, at least by the midpoint of the season, as he continues to accumulate snaps alongside Eric Kendricks, who was his pro comp by TFG, by the way. Being able to play with a guy that really fits your skill set, that has a veteran, experience and wisdom to pass on, is definitely going to help Dan Henley in the end. So next up, at number 4, let's talk about a guy that, man, dude, I started seeing some potential in him last season. Every time he was out there on the field getting snaps, of course, he's not a starter. I was pretty impressed with what he was asked to do and how he executed that. And that number 4, it's going to be Tito Agbonia, defensive lineman for the Chargers. Now, of course, Agbonia went down, or I should say Tito went down with injury. I can't remember at what point in the season last year, but it definitely kind of threw a bump in the road, right, to his not even breakout, but just kind of finding his role in the team as a later round pick for the Chargers last season. I do believe that this season is going to be the year where the Chargers, given what the defensive line looks like now, are going to ask him to do a little bit more in terms of run defense, right? And that's where I'm thinking he's going to maybe rotate into with guys like Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson a little more. Austin Johnson, another comeback player, by the way, I think has a lot of potential, him and J.C. Jackson. But either way, I think Tito, when he was out there on the field, he showed that he does have the ability to be a very nice relief player. I think his ceiling is a lot higher than a lot of us do believe. And that's, I think, because what he excels at in terms of, defending the run, where the Chargers really need a lot of help. And if he can come back from this last injury and find a nice spot in terms of rotation, maybe almost like a Braden Fayoko kind of spot last season where Fayoko was in there a lot trying to defend the run, I think Abonia could definitely step into that role and excel at that. And I do also think that his potential in terms of an interior pass rusher is actually not too bad as well. I think Tito's a very, well-rounded, balanced kind of guy, but does excel very much so more versus the run. And that's kind of what the Chargers need on that line right now. And again, kind of an easy name to forget because of the injury last season. But from what I saw last year, I was very impressed. So hopefully seeing Abonia come back this year instills confidence in the Chargers that we have nice depth on the defensive line. We got Nick Williams in there who just signed. We got Matlock who came in as a rookie this season. He looks very nice as a pass rusher. We got some, I would say, guys to replace Christian Covington and Braden Fayoko in terms of depth very well. And I think Tito might be able to give himself an opportunity for a bit more snaps this season, which was why I think he's going to break. I think as he gets more snaps, the coaching is going to start trusting him a little bit more in those situations, because from what I saw, he was very good in those situations. All right, here we go, guys. Number 3, my top 3 players of potential breakouts. Let's start out with number 3, and this is a player I get questions about almost every day. At number 3, got Isaiah Spiller. Now, Spiller, a lot of Chargers fans last season, very hyped, very excited. Maybe my fault because of how excited I was when we went out there and drafted him in the 2022 draft, right? I felt there was a lot of potential for him to go out there, steal that RB2 role from Josh Kelly, and become the next big thing for the Chargers at running back. That didn't end up happening. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of Chargers fans had the wind taken out of their sails when we did see Isaiah Spiller go out there and maybe not make the most of the opportunities that he was given. It felt like, that kind of translation into the pros hasn't quite hit. He doesn't have that breakaway speed. What makes him special? What separates him from the pack in terms of the Chargers' depth chart at running back? It didn't really feel like there was a nice fit there. I think a lot of that's going to change, and we're going to start being reminded as to why we were so excited that he was drafted last season. Again, reasons to be excited about Isaiah Spiller, and a big one I think to highlight is going to be his ability as a receiving back in the passing game. That's something that I feel the Chargers value immensely. And when you're taking a look at the Chargers situation at running back with Austin Eckler, if I'm that organization, if I'm Brandon Staley, if I'm Tom Telesco, I'm starting to kind of get serious about what we have on the roster outside of Austin Eckler, if that makes sense. The Chargers know what we have in Austin Eckler. We're ready to roll him out this season. But in case Austin Eckler isn't there next season, I really need to know what we have in Isaiah Spiller. And in order to do that, I think we're going to see a lot more opportunity for Isaiah Spiller to be given responsibilities and show us what he's got this season. And I think there's a really good player that still exists in Isaiah Spiller. I think, again, maybe more of a guy that can run the outside. Maybe doesn't have that breakaway speed, but it's always available, hits the right gaps. I think there's a lot of potential there. And that's why I think, again, given the situation at running back, given what the Chargers are probably going to try to do in helping themselves out and improving the run game this season, if I'm a Kellen Moore, I'm trying to look at every inch of this roster in order to help the run game. I think Isaiah Spiller is kind of at the top of my list, him and Joshua Kelly, as guys that could make an impact this season and maybe break out into a role that's permanent for them going forward. If you guys are asking me what Isaiah Spiller's role is going to be going forward, I think he's going to be the Chargers change of pace back, receiving back after the Austin Eckler days have come and gone. So Isaiah Spiller at number 3, I think he could be a very valuable asset going forward. At number 2, you guys probably know who it's going to be at this point, right? At the top 3 spots. I think at number 2, a lot of people are excited to see this man get to work. Quentin Johnston, wide receiver out of TCU. Our second TCU wide receiver on the list. And this one's very easy, right? We talked about in my last video reasons why I'm hyped for the upcoming season. Quentin Johnston, I think, was like my top 2 or something like that. Very, very important player for the Chargers going forward for a lot of different reasons, right? We just talked about the situation with running back and how that kind of could be a little sketchy going forward. Well, the Chargers next season are paying something like $60+ million for the wide receiver position. That could cause a tough decision to be made. And having a guy like Quentin Johnston to step into a potential wide receiver 1-2 role could end up being a very important factor to this team's offense going forward. All right, so keep that in mind. The money could cause some decisions. Outside of that, purely as a player and what he adds to the team, Quentin Johnston's going to be awesome to watch, right? Just like we talked about with Darius Davis, having a Justin Herbert that can access that part of the field. We've seen some statistics and some footage of them in rookie minicamp of him leading him and Justin Herbert, his statistics and leading wide receivers, how oftentimes those are completed. It looks very good. It looks very good for Quentin Johnston. That's one big thing I keep reminding people as to his ceiling and why Chargers fans should be extremely excited about his potential with Justin Herbert is Quentin Johnston and Max Duggan. Those guys, they worked at TCU, right? But Duggan in no way, shape, or form has the same skill set in terms of passing like Justin Herbert does. Justin Herbert is very good at leading his receivers. Justin Herbert's very good at attacking the deep parts of the field because he's got the kind of strength in that arm to access that part of the field. And all of a sudden, Quentin Johnston's not going to have to come back for passes, right? Or wait for the ball to get to him. He can just sprint, man. And the ball placement by Justin Herbert matched up with the speed of Quentin Johnston is going to be beautiful to watch. So Quentin Johnston, you guys have been waiting for a deep threat on this team. We finally got one in Quentin Johnston. Not only that, he's big, he's freakish, 6'4", he's fast. It's going to be a very fun weapon for the Chargers to watch this season. And I do think in terms of breakout potential, when you bring in a player into the league with the kind of measurables you're looking at with Quentin Johnston, with the kind of upside we've seen in his route running, the kind of upside we've seen in his production potentially in the pros, and you match him up with a Justin Herbert, I think that the term breakout, it beautifully fits that narrative. I don't know if it fits any other narrative as well. So we're going to give that to Quentin Johnston at number 2. Now at number 1. Before number 1, I do have one more honorable mention. This is called the sneaky level up. I won't spend too long on this. Justin Herbert. Okay. I almost put Justin Herbert at number 1 on this list, but again, this is a breakout list. He's, of course, already broken out, but I wanted to add him as a sneaky level up. And again, it's because of the Kellen Moore factor. It's because we've well-rounded out his weapons with Quentin Johnston. We got the running backs looking good, the tight ends looking good. I think a lot has to do with the Kellen Moore factor, though. I think this offense is about to take a drastic turn in terms of creativity, in terms of adjustments, in terms of effectiveness, execution. Everything from top to bottom is about to be I would say get a makeover. And that's going to be very, very nice for Justin Herbert in particular. I think, honestly, guys, and again, if I'm the Chargers, I'm very serious about how much time I have with Kellen Moore. I think the kind of work these guys are about to put in with the kind of weapons that Herbert has around him this season, this could be Herbert's next career year. Does that make sense? Which is crazy because this man's thrown for over 5,000 yards. I think he could do it again. And I think the touchdowns are going to go up. And I think with Kellen Moore, sky's the limit at this point, especially if they can get that run game back to looking pretty good. Okay, so the Chargers, Justin Herbert, almost was number 1 for me, but I decided to include him as another kind of honorable mention. And with that, my final player on this list at number 1, the number 1 player I think the Chargers are going to see break out this season, which again is probably going to shock some of you guys. For me, it's going to be Tuli Tuipulotu. Edge, just drafted this last season. Now, a lot of you guys are going to take a look at the roster and say, hey, Director, are you crazy? What are you smoking? You got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa on each side. Tuli's not going to overtake either one of those jobs. So what are we thinking? Well, I'm thinking in terms of opportunity, I don't know if there's very many positions on a football team that get more opportunity in terms of rotation than edge does, right? Than pass rushers do. Because definitely going to want to have, another shell to load in order to keep, everybody fresh out there. And I do believe that Tuipulotu is going to be one of those premium guys that can rotate in with a Joey Bosa, with a Khalil Mack, and make the most of those opportunities. Now, again, like with offensive line, I'm going to continue knocking on wood when we do these videos. Injuries do happen, right? At bare minimum, you're going to be rotating in, but injuries do happen. And that's where I think, a Tuipulotu gives you the nicest insurance policy you can get in terms of, like an edge 3 player or whatever. A rookie that's fresh, that's young, that has a lot of upside, that really had a lot of good production in college. coming in relief, I think that's a great option there. But outside of that, I think that he's going to prove right away that when he's on the field, he's making an impact. And that's going to cause even Brandon Staley to roll out all three of these guys, even if everybody's healthy, if that makes sense. I think Tuli's going to prove right away that he's going to be just a beast getting after the quarterback, and that's going to instill confidence and rotating him in more often, giving him more snaps. And I do believe by the end of the season, Quentin Johnston and Tua Pelotu, these guys are going to be some of the better first and second round picks that we've seen in a long time as Chargers fans. And I think Tua Pelotu is going to edge himself out literally and figuratively as one of those permanent guys in rotation that does have a lot of confidence in stepping in as the opposite edge of Joey Bosa going into the future. Of course, whether it be next year or the year after, Khalil Mack is going to move on from the team, and having a young guy like Tua Pelotu with his kind of upside gives the Chargers a really nice future at that position going forward. So I'm very excited for Tua Pelotu. I think that he's going to go out there and shock a lot of people in terms of his production, especially given what kind of opportunity he's going to have. And I think his opportunity is going to build as the season goes on. So Tuli at number 1 for the director. You guys in the comment section below, let me know some of your breakout guys in the roster. These are my top 10. Should be a good time. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Hit us up with a like and sub on your way out if you did enjoy this content. We'll see you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Tuli for life.